have seen the reports already of different members that have bought into different companies and are going to benefit off of this. And the biggest beneficiaries are going to be the private prisons. It's not going to be the American people. And that's what the worst part of this bill is. This big, ugly bill is not just an extension of cuts that were in the past, right? This is actually going to be paid for by making the poor poor, the richer richer, and by taking away your health care and taking away food assistance programs and things that people care about. And what for? To give tax breaks to the richest folks, and then to go after people that are contributing to this economy. We know immigrants contribute to this economy. They pay their taxes, and we know that when you look at the statistics, they're less likely to commit crimes. So this is part of J.D. Vance and this administration trying to pander to their base.
What are those Medicaid cuts, which you mentioned, and I know every district has people on Medicaid. What do those mean? I mean, have you been talking to hospitals? Have you been talking to healthcare providers? Have you been talking to folks in your district about what it would mean for them?
Absolutely. I was just visiting a couple of the hospitals in my district that said, look, if these Medicaid cuts go through, which really is healthcare for America, then we have to either reduce services at hospitals or even shut some down. And it makes no sense why anybody would vote for this bill. I mean, just take a look at some of our Republican colleagues in some of the swing districts. David Valadao, he's got over 60,000 people that are on Medicaid, which is health care in his district. This is not going to help him. This is not going to help their hospitals. It's going to make prices go up. There's going to be less money available for people to be able to afford health care. It's going to be more expensive for hospitals. If people lose their health care, we're also going to see emergency room wait times go up. People already complain and say, hey, it takes me 6 to 8 hours in an ER. Well, guess what? If this bill goes through, those wait times in the ER are going to only go higher because people are going to only be able to get emergency care in an ER instead of the preventive care. This is going to cost us a lot of money in the long run, despite, of course, that it's going to break the economy and the debt that it's going to add, all for the tax cuts for the rich and the wealthy.
You mentioned David Valadao was a frontline sort of swing district member, Republican. There are a bunch in your state of California. I'm curious, are they making noises? I mean, in my last segment, John Lovett was like, no one takes these people seriously, even though they should be the people with the strongest hand to play in terms of opposition or extracting promises, and everyone just thinks they're going to get run over ultimately. What's your read, since you're in the same state caucus?
Press talk is cheap, and that is what we hear from these members. It's all about talk. Oh, I'm concerned. But when it comes to action, they have no spine. They're not saying we're going to stick up for our constituents and we're going to do the right thing and we're going to vote no. So for me, the talk is cheap. Let's see if they deliver. Let's see if they vote no and they vote in the interest of their constituents. You know, Valadao was another member who said he was concerned that this administration was not going after criminals for deportations and ICE raids. He said he was concerned. Yet, he's going to help fund the largest operation that will only embolden this administration and make things worse. So let's see where they vote. I'm not going to hold my breath. These are members that have known to cave time and time again.
Congresswoman Annette Barragan, who represents District of California, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Still to come, when Trump said he wouldn't cut Medicaid, voters believed him, and now if those same voters are going to pay the price. It's next. Of the many horrible things about this Trump bill, one of the main focuses is that it could leave millions and millions of Americans without health insurance and put rural hospitals at risk of closure.
The resources are even fewer in southern Missouri.
We've lost 3 hospitals in the last 10 years in our region.
Karen White is the administrator for the only healthcare provider in a 3 to 4 hour radius. And Karen says nearly half the population her hospital services relies on Medicaid.
I think we will see loss of life. Maybe not immediate, but if chronic conditions go untreated for an extended period of time, it does result in lower quality of life, less people working.
Missouri, like many other states which will be affected by this policy change, overwhelmingly Trump.
It does seem a little odd that the folks that elected them will be the ones that are impacted the most with these cuts.
Like I said, those cuts will probably land the hardest in rural white districts, places like rural Missouri or Tennessee that voted overwhelmingly for them. Now, the Republicans' solution is basically to just lie about it. But if this bill passes, it's going to be harder for them to keep those lies going. Dave Dan is the executive editor of the American Prospect, which has been covering everything about this bill incredibly well, including how it threatens a hospital apocalypse. Now, Dave, that was a great piece that you wrote there. The Senate, in a kind of tacit acknowledgement of how catastrophic this was, came up with some rural hospital sort of bailout provision. But what I understand from reading your report on the Prospect, that's not good. Tell me about it.
Well, initially, the Senate leadership offered a $15 billion rural hospital fund to cover a nearly $1 trillion hole from loss of money from the healthcare system. So, I mean, just do the math on that one. Eventually, they got it up to $50 billion. But one thing that's important to note is it only lasts for 5 years. It's $10 billion each year for 5 years. And the Medicaid cuts in this bill are permanent. So at some point, the Rural Hospital Fund is going to stop giving you money. And these rural hospitals are going to be at risk. And the important thing is that rural hospitals are already at risk. I have seen a report that says 1/3 of all rural hospitals are already at risk of closure, about 700 of them. And so you take all of these Medicaid cuts and other cuts and add them in, and it's impossible to sort of get out of that with this sort of tip jar that they put together in the Senate.
One other provision of the bill that hasn't gotten as much attention, but you guys have been covering, and we've talked about a little bit, is that it may trigger automatic cuts to Medicare. So the Medicaid cuts are right there on the table. They're $1 trillion, right? People know about that. They're fighting about it. They're talking about it. The Medicare stuff is a little hidden because of some tricky mechanics about automatic pay cuts, but it does seem like this was an early issue in the bill that they said they were going to fix and just haven't fixed. And so if they pass it, it could entail like enormous Medicare cuts. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, we're talking about $500 billion in Medicare cuts over 10 years. And the reason is there's so many deficits in the bill that it triggers this law called the Pay-As-You-Go Act, or Pay-Go Act of 2010. And it's boring why it triggers that. But the point is that it will force across-the-board sequestration cuts across all of the federal government. But Medicare is one of the buckets that they can hit. And because there are so many deficits created by this bill, if you do the math, it comes out to about $45 billion in the first year in 2026. Can't be avoided, can't be put after the midterms, and then continue on for the next 10. So you're talking about $500 billion in Medicare cuts on top of the $1 trillion in Medicaid cuts, and on top of the fact that they're not going to renew the ACA premium support that was put into I believe the Inflation Reduction Act. And so every side of the healthcare system is going to be hit by this. There's not going to be much escape here.
Yeah, and one important point here, which when you made the reporting, we talked about rural hospital apocalypse, is, look, you may not be one of the people who you individually are kicked off Medicaid, or the Medicare cuts hit you individually, or you're one of the 5 million people whose ACA healthcare might go away because they're not renewing these subsidies. There's a lot of people. But the system, the entire system, depends profoundly on that money flowing through it. And if you choke that off, the system's going to break down.
That's correct. So if you think about it, if a hospital closes, those patients, they don't just die, they go to other hospitals. And those hospitals have to absorb those patients. Some of those patients, maybe many of those patients, are going to be uninsured. And under federal law, if you go to an emergency room, you have to be cared for. That ends up being uncompensated care that the hospital system has to absorb. So there are deficit implications that are put in to those hospitals. Our hospitals are already understaffed. Providers are already seeing shortages. They're going to have more patients. They're going to have And, the idea that you sitting in some other part of the country that isn't going to see a hospital closure are shielded from the effects of this bill, it's just not very true. I mean, we're going to see effects all over the healthcare system from the cuts, the severe cuts, taking $1 trillion, maybe $1.5 trillion out of the healthcare system. It's impossible to avoid.
Yeah, this is an interesting stat just about the distribution effects of the 18 Republican House districts that are rated the toss-ups or merely lean in GOP's direction. 5 are among the most dependent on Medicaid, right? So it's like there are like toss-up seats where those 5 are an issue. David was doing amazing reporting on this. The team here for President. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Coming up, Congressman Jamie Raskin will be here. Don't go away.
MSNBC News presents Season 2 of the hit series from NBC News Studios, Leguizamo Does America, hosted by John Leguizamo.
We're going to connect with some Latinos, eat some food, and do a little dancing.
Join him for 6 new episodes as he explores the Latino experience in 6 more iconic American cities.
I'm here to meet with some exceptional Latin people leading the way. So come on, let's go.
Leguizamo Does America, Season 2 premieres Sunday at 9 p.m. Eastern on MSNBC. Subscribe to MSNBC Premium on Apple Podcasts for early access, ad-free listening, and bonus content to all of MSNBC's original podcasts, including the chart-topping series The Best People with Nicole Wallace, Why Is This Happening?, Name Justice, and more. Plus new episodes of all your favorite MSNBC shows ad-free, and ad-free listening to all of Rachel Maddow's original series, Ultra, Mad Men, and Deja News. Subscribe to MSNBC Premium on Apple Podcasts.
Back in March, we brought you this crazy story about a history teacher in Idaho named Sarah Inama, who decorated her 6th grade classroom with inspirational posters like this one that reads, "In this room, everyone is welcome, accepted, respected, encouraged, valued, and equal." And an even more straightforward one showing children's raised hands with the tagline, "Everyone is welcome here." Motivational messages simply meant to tell students, wherever you are, you belong here. It's the type of poster I think a lot of us saw growing up in classrooms. It shouldn't be controversial, but it was.
My building administration came to me during my lunch period and told me that they needed to be taken down by the end of the day. They told me that they were in violation of district policy because in today's political environment, they're considered personal opinion.
However, in Sarah's opinion, they weren't.
And so I went back into my classroom and put it back up. And I emailed my principal and said, I don't agree. I don't agree that this is a personal opinion. I feel like this is the basis of public education.
In this political environment, that is not acceptable.
Yeah, I was told a couple things, that everyone is welcome here is not something that everybody believes. So that's what makes it a personal opinion.
You were told this, that not everybody believes everyone is welcome.
Right.
Ultimately, Sarah Inama ended up resigning from that district. And yesterday, a new law went into effect in the state that prohibits flags or banners depicting political viewpoints from public K through 12 classrooms. The Attorney General of Idaho, former Republican Congressman Robert Lauber, put out guidance for the enforcement of that law, writing that the Idaho Department of Education Code must consider whether a displayed flag or banner illustrates or shows someone's opinion, emotions, beliefs, or thoughts regarding politics, economics, society, faith, or religion. And if you think, well, that's pretty general, no, he specifically talked about everyone is welcome here. These signs are part of an ideological and social movement which started in the Twin Cities of Minnesota following the 2016 election of Donald Trump. Now, just to fact check the Attorney General, the signs did start at a Twin Cities high school, right about that. They started after someone sprayed racist graffiti on the school the day after Donald Trump was elected in 2016, and a group of women made the sign to reassure the kids in that school that indeed everyone is welcome here. When you hear them all talking about fighting the woke culture, keep an eye on what they decide to cancel, because it might offend someone. And ask yourself who exactly it is that is offended by this.
we've been sent home for the night. There are at least 3 groups of Republicans who are acting very recalcitrant and evasive. One are those who are saying that this is an absolute debt exploder, and they spend all their time talking about reducing deficits and debt, and this will add $3.5 or $4 trillion to the debt. The second group is those who are really afraid, if not for moral reasons, then at least political reasons, of what it means to throw 17 million people off of Medicaid and 42 million people off of nutrition assistance. So they might be afraid for their election, or they might be having some hang of conscience about it. And the third are those who learned from the Senate that they should hold out and try to shake Trump down for whatever it is they can extract for themselves or their particular political groupings or district. So that's what's creating this long holdup. The shocking thing is they allocated only 1 hour of debate, 30 minutes on each side, to this entire bill, which will be absolutely life-changing for basically everybody in America. 1 hour of debate, and then they kept us waiting around for 6, 7, 8 hours. We could have been debating the bill and talking about its provisions, but they would prefer to just have everybody, wandering around in the dark and eating pellets.
There was this exchange that happened today, reported by the outlet Notice, and I wanted to get your thoughts on it, because it, to me, kind of epitomizes everything about where we are. According to 3 sources with direct knowledge of the comments, this is Trump meeting with the holdouts. The president told Republicans at this meeting, there are 3 things Congress shouldn't touch if they want to win elections: Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security. But we're touching Medicaid in this bill, one member responded to Trump. According to 3 sources, we don't know what Trump said back. What do you make of it?
Well, there's a lot of discussion on the floor about whether or not Trump really understands what's in this bill or not, and whether he's out of it. And the extraordinary thing about that is that, of course, all of these people have gotten in line despite their own misgivings, because Trump is leading the way, but Trump might not even understand what's in the bill. So it's a very dangerous moment when you think about what democracy is, and it doesn't speak well for what has become of the Republican Party. Now, some people think that, it's just Trump's devilishly clever politics, where he's already distancing himself from a bill that he knows will be a nightmare, and then he'll blame it on somebody else for not having told him what was really in there. We don't know. But the point is that we should, as a society, be able to step back from this and say, look, if it's a great bill, let's take 2 weeks and explain to everybody how great it is. And if it's a terrible bill, let's get rid of it and let's start all over.
Yeah, and I think, my read on this is that he doesn't really care that much one way or the other, and certainly doesn't care enough to spend the time to understand, the distributional consequences of the Medicaid provisions. There's no way that if you sat him down, he could talk you through what's happening here. But the other thing that I wanted to ask you about is, part of what's so weird to me is we had, the first few months of his administration, and Elon Musk with his chainsaw Doge, and Russ voted OMB, who basically have staked themselves in the Constitution principle that spending decisions from Congress are simple advice. They're sort of suggestions. And then the executive can do with them what they want. And it's very weird to be legislating under those circumstances to me. All this ICE money, right? Presumably some future Democratic administration could be like, no, we're not spending it. It doesn't seem to have ultimately sunk into Congress that they have allowed so much power to accrete to Trump and the executive.
Well, the Democrats understand it because, of course, what he's doing is sabotaging all of the legislation that we've either gotten passed with President Biden or that we fought for in some kind of compromise with the Republicans, and he thinks he's got the power just to impound it, thwart it, redirect it, faithfully executed, not thwarted and rewritten, and not impounded. An Appropriations Act, Chris, as you know, is a federal law, just like the law saying you cannot assault a federal officer. You can't violate an Appropriations Act and just decide you're going to use the money for a different purpose.
Do you think the political consequences will show up for your members of the House who vote for this bill, particularly those, say, the ones in the swing districts, the ones like Derek Van Orden in Wisconsin, who's got a lot of Medicaid recipients in rural hospitals in his district?
Yes, because the pain will start to be felt immediately as millions of people are thrown off of Medicaid, off Medicare in different ways, the Affordable Care Act, and as people lose their SNAP benefits. And what is it for? They can't say it's for deficit reduction or debt reduction. They're adding trillions of dollars to the debt. It's all to give money to the very richest people in the society who run the Republican Party, and they will continue this authoritarian program. I mean, authoritarianism is always involved in class war of the rich against the rest of society.
Yeah.
And so they're acting out this drama.
Congressman Jamie Raskin, thanks for making time on a very, very busy day and evening. That's all in for this Wednesday night. You can catch us every weeknight at 8 o'clock.
just say once and for all, factually, I deal in facts, that you have Republicans in the current party, the recent party, and the magnified party that are very fiscally irresponsible. That's how they go. They don't pay for things. It affects the economy, and they want to give tax cuts to multimillionaires and move the money towards the rich, but also set up a debt trap. Now, we have elections. People could say, well, that's good or bad, but that's the facts. And so I'm curious,
$16 million to get it through. That's a hell of a good deal for Paramount. I mean, I don't know how much money they're going to make by selling this, but and the same thing happened with Disney. We tend to forget that Amazon paid Melania Trump $41 million for a documentary. There is no documentary ever produced in the history of the world for anything approaching $41 million. That's a subject I know something about.
Hey, the War Room wouldn't even make $40 million in today's adjusted dollars.
Yeah, right in front of you. It's just an old shakedown, like it would be terrible if someone broke your windows out, wouldn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you see it as extortion. You see it as go ahead.
How else could you see it? You want to merge it? And a lawsuit, set a lawsuit, you get to merge. I don't know how an objective person could look at this and that would not be the first thought that comes to his mind. If this was the first time, you could say, well, it's a one-off. You just put out 3 other instances. I would add to Amazon, so 4 previous things. There's a pattern here. There's a real pattern.
Well, you're right to add Amazon. We'll pull that graphic back up when we have it ready in a second. There it is. These are just settlements in the cases. James is absolutely right. The $40 million that Amazon paid, which is run by Bezos, which has also had this back and forth fight with Trump, was, to put it economically, far above market value. There was not a market demand or an odd. You can have a public bidding process and see whether companies that aren't in a fight with Trump put up 30, 40, 50 million for a Melania doc. But as you say, that was also suspect. While Bezos, of course, is out gallivanting, you mentioned that earlier in our unequal times. What is to be done, James? I mean, Senator Wyden says he is going to preserve this material and thinks there should be an investigation and a possible prosecution in the future.
What is to be done is you must win an election. And the way you win the election is coming up in time. I hate to be like a one-road giant. Johnny Hondo, the opposite going to win the election. The way you win the election is you focus on the horror of this bill that just passed Congress. Stay unified, recruit. You're going to win big in Virginia. I think you're going to win big in New Jersey, and you're going to roll in the 26. The only way that you can account for this, the only way you can investigate this is through political power, and that only comes by winning elections.
So let me ask you a question that I've gotten from MSNBC viewers and other people come up to me and they say, well, with everything going on, will there be free and fair elections? James is telling me to go get organized. They're worried about that. What do you say to that question?
I'd say your concerns are legitimate. I never tell anybody that's worried that, no, don't you worry about that. Because he's going to see what's going to happen in Virginia and New Jersey. The data's going to be coming in on this bill. We're going to start seeing the Somerset, North Carolina, and Democrat up in the Senate up 12 points. And it's going to get worse. He's going to see that coming. He's going to try to do anything that he can possibly to try to extricate himself from what is almost certain to be a humiliating loss in November of 2026. So people should be worried. They should be vigilant. They should watch this. You should. Not just the media. Everybody should watch it. In no way we're not going to have an election. That's got to be the message. And I think that's a popular concept.
Well, I got my final question for you. You'll never guess what it's about.
All right.
You mentioned that New York City had this mayor's race.
Right.
The winner here is an AOC South Democratic Socialist. You had your in the primary. You had your battles with various folks. We talk about what's winnability and what's a good campaign message. A lot of folks outside of New York are watching the race. There's a lot of different views of it. Inside New York, a big part of the message was populism, affordability, make this city livable for everybody again. A lot of people find that to be an uplifting message, although he may have other demerits, including figuring out how he speaks about foreign policy and other issues, which also matter to a lot of people in New York. So I'm not painting it with one brush. But your thoughts on the results, are they relevant to the Democrats and the rest of the country or not?
I think they are, because he never got out of talking about affordability and how they met this area. Yeah, he had some, I would say, esoteric positions, people uncomfortable. They look beyond that. And I think the message is, that's what we got to talk about. And we talk about the big, beautiful bill, we got to talk about how this is going to increase cost of Americans. Cost of living is going to go up for most average Americans, and there's real power in that. Governments fell all around the world on this issue of cost of living. We probably lost the presidency because it was a big contributing factor to us losing the presidency.
So let me make sure I'm hearing you right. You think Zoran was right to hammer affordability?
I absolutely do. And yes, he absolutely understood what it was about. And Andrew just never addressed that. And it was, the big thing this guy does, he sees people. People say, I don't know if I'll do that job, but he sees me. He knows what it's like to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, to go to the transit station, to get on the transit, how much a quarter increase in the transit fare is going to hurt me. He knows what it's like to have to get off the train, walk 6 hours to work 9 hours a day, to come back and your kids are there. He knows that. And let me tell you, a lot of politics is just telling people that they exist. And I see you and your problem. Maybe the solution is impractical, but at least he sees us.
Really striking.
That was a big factor.
Wanted to get your read on that. James Carville, on many topics. Thanks for joining us tonight.
I've been great and enjoying the music in the background.
Hey, the dogs are barking. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
I'll tell folks what's coming up. We turn to California, where Governor Newsom has some new ideas about dealing with what has been a housing crisis there, even with green trade-offs. But first, the verdict in the Diddy case came today. That's next.
Stay connected with the MSNBC app, bringing you breaking news and analysis anytime, anywhere.
All the stories that we're covering are live and happening as we speak.
Watch your favorite shows live.
What's happening right now is a hostile takeover of the U.S. government.
Read live blogs and in-depth essays, and listen to coverage as it unfolds. Go beyond the what to understand the why. Download the app now at msnbc.com/app.
Turning to a case with major implications today, well outside of music or business in New York, a jury reaching the verdict today in the trial of mogul Sean Diddy Combs, finding him not guilty of the two most serious charges in this case, racketeering and sex trafficking, but also finding him guilty on two lesser crimes involving prostitution and transportation. The mixed verdict drawing strong reactions from Combs detractors and fans, many gathering outside the courthouse today for the culmination of this long saga, this 7-week federal trial, the news rippling across the nation.
Mixed verdict here. Sex trafficking, not guilty.
Wow, that's a big deal. Okay, so that is obviously an enormous win for the defense.
We're pleased that he's finally been held responsible for.
The jury clearly did not believe the defendant beyond a reasonable doubt that these two women were sex trafficked by force.
The jurors stood up for what was right.
This is a real backlash, I think, to the Me Too movement. We as a society still have a lot of trouble understanding these both and kind of situations.
This particular case may not fit neatly into any wider narratives. These two convictions are still serious crimes. The DOJ asking the judge to imprison Combs for 4 to 5 years for those two guilty decisions there. But the acquittal on the more serious charges, which would have carried a life sentence, are a huge legal reprieve for Combs, who you see there dropped to his knees in apparent prayer at the news of the verdict inside the courtroom. No cameras, so these are different sketches of that dramatic moment. The outcome suggests this jury did not buy the prosecution's core theory that Diddy's alleged conduct rose to the level of a corrupt organization or gang, to the level of something more, a gang or an organized sex trafficking ring. Diddy will remain incarcerated until sentencing, with the judge denying bail today, saying Combs has a propensity for violence and that it takes